speaking of, tariffs and trade and all of these uncertainties, let's take that discussion forward. We have Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, joining in. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. And, we here in India have been watching the headlines, obviously the big US-China thaw that's happened. But my first question to you is that given the developments in the subcontinent over the last 7-8 days and the geopolitical escalation and the US's stance on it, the statements that we've seen coming out repeatedly from the president, from J.D. Vance, from others, could that cast a shadow in any form on the India-US trade deal that is still being, deliberated? I think the Commerce Secretary is going to be in the US in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Surabhi, first for having me on this show. A pleasure being here with you guys. I think there's a dangerous trend that we are getting to see here, which needs to be looked at very closely. There is a tendency to connect trade with everything. And particularly when issues of bilateral conflict get connected with trade, or trade is taken as an instrument for resolving these issues or perpetuating with these issues, it's not a very healthy trend, because then trade does not remain market-driven anymore. Trade gets completely tweaked by other considerations, and that's not the way trade should be. Certainly, it's not the way trade can be done to benefit people. We see that having happened earlier. We see that having happened with respect to Russia, Ukraine, the Ukraine mineral deal that has been worked out with the United States. We saw shades of it coming up in the statements that you alluded to, the US president mentioning about his brokering a deal, India contradicting, he continuing to insist that he played a role in that. And yes, I agree with you. I think the fact that he would claim credit for having brought this current crisis to a datat, that's something on which there will be some conversation, certainly, in the forthcoming trade talks that are coming up. And I think India is also beginning to feel a bit agitated by this posture, because this is for the first time since the announcement of the tariffs that we did see on this round, India thinking of taking the US steel and aluminium tariffs to the WTO for a possible retaliation. So I think trade is really getting messy now.
No, absolutely. And on that, Mr. Palit, I'm glad you brought that point up, and it came through immediately when all these statements were coming in. So there seems to be a fundamental disconnect. The US president saying, you stop the ceasefire and I'll do more trade with you. But I don't think that posture is flying at all with the Indian side. There's been no acknowledgement actually of any of that in all of the Indian government statements. So do you think India will even be open to talking trade in exchange for, it's trade and terror? They're two very different things.
Surabhi, I take your point, but I'm just wondering about the room that you have in this regard for flexibility and maneuvering. Because if this point continues to come out of the United States that, look, guys, you better get into a good deal with us. Otherwise, we don't think that we will be able to play the role that you expect from us when future conflicts happen, and don't expect us to play a positive role in settling those issues. And there are countries across the world who have accepted what we are giving them. Why are you not accepting to those? I think this puts a country like India in a rather awkward position, because on one hand, it does have a very solid and stable relationship with the United States on a number of areas, not just strategic areas, but economic areas. But on the other hand, it lives in a neighborhood which is getting hostile by the day. And the enmities are increasing. There are no signs of peaceful resolution around India, and nothing in the foreseeable future. It does put India in an awkward position. And I think there is a further complication that comes in here. The US would have obviously noted the fact that India is engaged in simultaneous FTA negotiations. It's concluded one with UK, which has been a fairly progressive FTA by Indian standards. The mother of all FTAs is expected to come with the European Union. And there are issues which the US would want to be given to them, conceded to them, included in those FTAs and in addition to those FTAs. Now, it is this additional areas, say, for example, opening up India's government procurement market, which was listed as a factor by the US the day before the reciprocal tariffs were announced in the Foreign Trade Barriers report that it brought out. Now, these are issues where it is not easy for India to immediately agree And particularly when you have the threat of a conflict management role being offered to you,
Yeah.
as some form of a carrot. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mr. Palit, good morning. Uh, so one is, of course, posturing. The other is seeing what the US is actually doing, right? I mean, if you are any of the trading partners who Trump has threatened with very high tariffs, he has imposed very high tariffs, and then you look at how quickly they've folded with China. You actually would feel, I mean, you'd feel better, I mean, of holding out. I mean, it's actually, I can't see any, there are 4 or 5 things which they wanted to achieve with these tariffs. The way they folded with China without China giving in too much, none of those objectives have been achieved. So they've folded in that sense, at least in round 1, and there'll be more negotiations. So actually, isn't that an indication of, I'm not saying we get the same deal, but my point is they're willing to do this. They're willing to come down very fast without very much in return.
I think the game is slowly getting exposed. If you look at the US-China deal or the issue on which the agreement was done, 80% of it was a discussion on fentanyls. It has nothing to do with anything else, any other consideration, any other trade fact, any other trade issues. If you look across the world, the kind of reactions that the US is generating through its trade policy is completely ad hoc and totally unconnected. Now, the point over here is that this is something which is becoming so obvious that sooner or later, all countries, I mean, there are countries who will have a bigger capacity to resist this ad hocism on part of the US. There are countries which will not. For example, a country like Vietnam, given its dependence on the US market, given the fact that it's sandwiched between US and China in a regional supremacy battle, it will not have that room for maneuver. But I was just listening to the earlier section that you just concluded, the executive order on local manufacturing. This is nothing new. This is what the CHIPS Act was all about. This is what the IRA Act of the President Biden was all about. There's only one difference. The difference is that this time it is being told that foreign companies will be scrutinized that much harder. Well, they were always being scrutinized. It's not that the foreign companies would have been coming in with their own agenda and then getting away with this. If you look at the fallacy involved here, just what's been going on with ByteDance and TikTok.
Yeah.
Disinvestment till now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mr. Pal, my short point was that other trading partners will feel emboldened. That's all. Maybe they won't hold out, and not everybody's got the same size and muscle that China has, and countries like Vietnam, of course, much more dependent. But everyone is watching this closely in terms of how this has gone on. So that's my short point. I think that's fair.
I would say I definitely partly agree to it, but I would definitely also caution over the fact that the US is going to use national security and its ability to provide security guarantee as a very important tool in all the negotiations that it is going to do, and not all countries will be able to resist that. Some will not be able to do by that extent. So I definitely partly agree with you, but not wholly.
All right. No, point taken. Is a nuanced subject, and we have to look at that in that way. Thank you very much, Mr. Palit, for joining us and running us through your perspective. It's a pleasure having you with us here.